a federal judge ordered that the Trump administration fully fund SNAP. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's a food assistance program that 42 million Americans rely on to feed their families. The Trump administration had previously agreed to fund 50% and then 65% of the program, which has been without funding as a result of the government shutdown. This afternoon, the Judge John McConnell, called the harm done by this shutdown irreparable, saying this, quote, "Last weekend, SNAP benefits lapsed for the first time in our nation's history. This is a problem that could have and should have been avoided. People have gone without for too long. Not making payments to them for even another day is simply unacceptable." The Trump administration has until tomorrow to comply with that judge's order.
It is now day 37 of this government shutdown. President Trump again urging the Senate to end with the ending of the filibuster to get things going. But Senate Majority Leader John Thune says it is not happening. The breaking news this morning is the FAA is now being forced to reduce air traffic levels at 40 key airports beginning tomorrow morning if no deal is reached. Democrats, meanwhile, are riding high after the blue sweep in Tuesday night's elections. But the Trump administration is responding with, "The fight has just begun."
Something historic just happened in Washington. A federal judge just tore the lid off something Trump's team had spent years trying to keep buried. And this time, it isn't rumor, it isn't speculation. It's on the record. The court has ruled that Trump's attempt to suspend the federal SNAP program, the one feeding over 42 million Americans, was unlawful. But that wasn't the part that shook D.C. What came next did. Because with that ruling, the judge ordered the release of sealed civil court files tied to the administration's internal decisions, documents that were never meant to see daylight. Within minutes, newsrooms went on alert, congressional staffers froze mid-email, and everyone who has ever worked around the Oval Office understood the same thing. When a judge orders sealed presidential files unsealed, something big is coming. The order wasn't about partisanship. It was about transparency. The court said bluntly that the public had the right to know what the government was doing with their food aid, their tax money, their livelihoods. And once that seal broke, the ripple tore straight through the White House. By evening, senior Democrats were calling emergency meetings. Congressman Jamie Raskin told reporters the ruling proved why subpoena power matters, that if they regain the House in 2026, these files will be only the beginning. Republicans called it a political stunt. But inside the West Wing, aides described it differently, naming it a panic. Because those files don't just mention policy. They contain emails, memos, directives, paper trails that trace how the administration handled programs designed for low-income families right before an election. And one former Justice Department official even told Politico, if what's in there matches the internal chatter we've seen, it's a legal nightmare. And here's where it twists even further. Remember Special Counsel Jack Smith, the man whose investigations were frozen the moment Trump retook office in 2024. He's still on record saying the government had enough evidence to convict the president if he hadn't been reelected. That evidence didn't disappear. It was sealed under executive privilege. And now, for the first time, a judge has decided those walls don't hold forever.
Special Counsel Jack Smith is speaking publicly for the very first time about his investigations into Donald Trump, defending his team and his prosecutors and saying it's ludicrous to say the investigations of the president were politically motivated.
The just incredible high level of integrity and competence and willingness to sacrifice of the people who do this work. And I'm talking about the people I worked with in the special counsel's office, but the Department of Justice in the U.S., the FBI, are filled with people like this. And these are people who are not self-promoters. They do not like to tell their own story. They cannot start a sentence with I, they start that with we. These are team players who don't want anything but to do good in the world. They're not interested in politics. And I get very concerned when I see how easy it is to demonize these people for political ends, when these are the very sort of people I think we should be celebrating.
Think about that. A sitting president, mid-second term, watching his own files being pried open by the same justice system he once controlled. Congress smells blood in the water. Smith's prosecutors are still technically employed inside a Justice Department led by the very man they investigated. And the public, the same Americans choosing between rent and groceries every week, are about to see where their safety net really went. The timing couldn't be more explosive. Midterms are months away. The House is up for grabs. Democrats are already building their messaging around accountability. Republicans are scrambling to figure out how to defend a president whose court losses are piling up. And the numbers don't lie. 42 million Americans rely on SNAP. 30 million more receive supplemental aid through associated state programs. Cutting that, even temporarily, would ripple through every grocery store, every food bank, every rural town. The court called Trump's suspension arbitrary and capricious. Translation: illegal. Now combine that with the unsealing order and you get what one legal analyst called a constitutional thunderclap. Because once those files are public, they become fair game for Congress. Subpoenas, hearings, televised testimonies. And the January 6th committee will look like a dress rehearsal. Already, new hashtags are trending. And in between, the exhausted middle is wondering if this is finally the moment when consequences actually mean something. Inside the White House, sources say Trump was furious. One aide described him pacing the hallway outside the cabinet room, demanding to know who let this happen. Another said he was convinced the judge's ruling was part of a coordinated attack, that deep state lawyers timed it to hit before the midterms. But in truth, this ruling was months in the making. Federal courts don't move fast, they move carefully. Every document reviewed, every argument weighed. And for the judge to side against the president twice in one order, blocking a federal policy and releasing sealed records, that's not politics, that's history. Here's why this matters beyond Trump. If the president's files can be forced into the open, every future president faces the same precedent. Transparency becomes the standard, not the exception. And in a country built on secrecy, that's terrifying for anyone in power. So what happens next? The Justice Department has 72 hours to appeal the unsealing. Legal experts doubt it'll stick. The ruling cites the Public Interest Clause under the Freedom of Information Act, a clause rarely used against a sitting administration. Once that window closes, the documents move to public docket. Congressional staffers are already preparing. Committees are reserving hearing rooms. Democrats are lining up potential witnesses, from former USDA officials to internal communications officers, all ready to testify on how food aid policy was weaponized for political leverage. And hovering above it all is Jack Smith, silent but smiling. His office released no statement, but sources confirmed they were informed of the ruling an hour before it went public. One former prosecutor said, "If those files match his evidence logs, the country's about to learn exactly what he meant by enough to convict. But even if the documents come out clean, the damage is done. The illusion of invincibility is gone." For years, Trump built a narrative that every scandal made him stronger. But this one cuts differently. It's not about gossip or hearsay. It's about the mechanics of government. Signatures, memos, money. The kind of things you can't tweet away. In Washington, people are whispering that this could be the beginning of a slow unraveling, not through impeachment or protest, but through paperwork. The same system he thought he mastered might now be writing his downfall, one redacted page at a time. And in the end, the question isn't whether Trump faces arrest or walks free. It's whether the American public still cares enough to read what's written in black and white. Because if they do, everything changes. If they don't, power stays where it's always been, above the law. For now, the countdown begins. 72 hours until the unsealing. After that, there's no going back.